Okay, so are we ready to dive into this whole midlife crisis thing? You know the image, right? Someone hits 40, and suddenly they're sporting a sports car,
Oh, yeah.
making impulsive decisions,
Yeah.
acting like their time is running out.
Right.
It's such a classic trope, like we see it everywhere. Movies, books,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
even board games. But is there any truth to it?
Well, it's certainly ingrained in our cultural consciousness, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
we almost expect a certain level of turmoil at that stage of life.
Right, like a universal
Yeah.
rite of passage.
Exactly.
But you know, it's fascinating. The term midlife crisis itself
Yeah.
is relatively recent.
Yeah.
It was only coined in 1965.
Yes. Elliot Jacques, who first used the phrase,
Okay.
was actually focused on creativity.
Interesting.
He observed that a lot of artists, like Rossini and Goethe,
Okay.
experienced significant shifts in their creative output around the age of 37.
Interesting.
Some flourished, while others seemed to hit a wall.
So it began with artists, not with sudden urges to buy a red convertible.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a fresh perspective. So how did this idea then go from a niche observation about artists to this widespread cultural phenomenon?
Well, Gail Sheehy's 1976 bestseller Passages really brought the concept into the mainstream.
Yeah.
And she linked the midlife crisis to broader stages of adult development,
Okay.
making it relatable to a wide audience.
So she popularized this idea that our lives unfold in these predictable stages,
Yeah.
with midlife as this inevitable
Yeah.
point of crisis.
Right.
That's quite a legacy. But what does the research say? Is this sense of crisis really a universal experience?
Well, that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
The research paints a more nuanced picture.
Yep.
For example, the Midas study, Midlife in the United States,
Uh-huh.
a large-scale study from the 1990s,
Okay.
challenged the stereotype.
Oh, tell me more about that. What did they find?
Contrary to popular belief, they discovered that well-being often actually increases with age.
Really?
Now, that's not to say there aren't challenges in midlife.
Right.
But a full-blown crisis doesn't seem to be the norm.
Wow. So that really challenges the assumption that everyone faces this tumultuous crisis in midlife.
Right.
It sounds like things might be a bit more complicated than that.
Exactly. And there's another fascinating finding to consider.
Okay.
Economists discovered a U-shaped curve when charting happiness levels across the lifespan.
A U-shaped curve. What does that even signify?
So it means happiness tends to be high in our youth,
Okay.
dips a bit in midlife, and then rises again in our later years.
Interesting.
What's even more striking is that this pattern isn't unique to humans. It's been observed in great apes too.
That's wild. It makes you think about the evolutionary roots of these experiences, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But why the dip in midlife specifically? Like, what is happening during that period?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
Hannah Schwandt suggests that this dip might be tied to our expectations.
Expectations. You mean like the classic midlife realization that we haven't achieved everything we thought we would?
Precisely.
Schwandt found that younger people are often overly optimistic about the future.
Right.
But by midlife, reality has set in.
Yeah.
People begin to realize that time is finite
Yeah.
and they might not achieve all their aspirations.
Right.
This can lead to a sense of disappointment or even regret.
It's that feeling of what if, right?
Yeah.
Like certain doors are closing, possibilities narrowing.
Well, exactly.
I bet a lot of our listeners can relate to that feeling, that sense of time slipping away.
Absolutely.
But it's crucial to remember that not everyone experiences midlife this way.
Right, right.
Susan Krauss-Whitbourn's research revealed that meaning in life actually tends to increase with age.
Interesting.
So while there may be a dip in happiness,
Yeah.
there's also potential for growth and finding deeper purpose.
Absolutely.
So maybe it's not so much a crisis of happiness,
Yeah.
but a period of recalibration,
Yeah.
figuring out what truly matters,
Right.
a time to reassess our values and priorities.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. Less about a dramatic meltdown and more about a reevaluation of what brings true fulfillment.
Okay.
And, this period of recalibration often leads to a kind of philosophical crisis as well.
Okay.
It's not just about happiness anymore,
Right.
but questioning the very meaning of our existence.
That's a deep dive indeed.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to explore this existential side of midlife?
Well, the experience of John Stuart Mill offers a fascinating case study.
Okay.
Now, he didn't experience this in midlife.
Okay.
It actually went through a profound crisis in his early 20s.
Really?
Yeah.
John Stuart Mill, the philosopher.
Yeah.
What triggered this crisis for him?
So Mill was brilliant. deeply committed to social reform.
Okay.
Yet he had this realization that even if he achieved all his goals,
Yep.
it might not bring him lasting happiness.
Wow.
Imagine dedicating your life to something
Yeah.
only to question its fundamental connection to your own fulfillment.
That's a heavy realization for someone so young. What led him to that point?
Yeah.
It seems almost paradoxical.
His upbringing played a significant role.
Okay.
His father, a strict utilitarian, instilled in him the greatest happiness principle.
Okay.
The idea that actions should maximize happiness for the greatest number of people.
Right.
So Mill was driven by this noble goal,
Yeah.
but it started to feel hollow,
Okay.
like he was living his father's dream instead of his own.
It's like he was on autopilot,
Yeah.
achieving all the right things,
Yeah.
but feeling this sense of emptiness inside. It makes you think about how many of us might be chasing goals that don't truly resonate with our deeper selves. So how did Mill break free from this existential crisis?
His turning point came when he immersed himself in the poetry of William Wordsworth.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. What did Wordsworth's poetry offer that Mill couldn't find in his pursuit of social reform? It must have been a completely different way of experiencing the world.
Exactly. Wordsworth poetry offered Mill a sense of beauty,
Okay.
of inherent value in the experience itself, not tied to any external outcome or goal.
Well-
It wasn't about fixing problems or maximizing happiness.
Right.
It was about connecting with something deeper,
Yeah.
something more existential. And this difference is crucial, you see.
Okay.
It gets to the heart of what truly makes a life meaningful.
Okay, I'm hooked. Break this down for us. What's the difference between the kind of value found in his social reform work and the value he discovered in Wordsworth's poetry?
So in philosophy, we talk about ameliorative value and existential value.
Okay.
Ameliorative value is about solving problems,
Okay.
like going to the dentist to fix a toothache. It's about making things better.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then existential value is?
Existential value is about what makes life worth living for its own sake.
Okay.
It's not about achieving something in the future,
Right.
but finding inherent meaning in the present moment.
Okay.
Think of listening to music that moves you deeply,
Okay.
being lost in a captivating conversation,
Right.
or feeling a sense of awe in nature.
I'm starting to see the distinction. It's
Yeah.
like the difference between checking tasks off a to-do list
Yeah.
and losing yourself in a moment of pure joy and connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we navigate midlife,
Right.
many of us grapple with this.
Right.
We spent years striving,
Right.
achieving, fixing.
Yeah.
But then we ask ourselves, what now?
Yeah.
What truly brings me joy and meaning, regardless of any external accomplishment?
Yeah.
This is what Mill discovered through Wordsworth's poetry.
Right.
A way to connect with the existential value in life itself.
This is resonating on such a deep level. It makes you realize that the midlife crisis, if we even want to call it that,
Yeah.
might not be a crisis of achievement, but a crisis of meaning.
Precisely.
Uh,
And interestingly,
Yeah.
even Wordsworth, the poet who helped Mill through his crisis,
Yeah.
wasn't immune to the challenges of midlife.
Oh, wow.
He also experienced a sense of loss, a nostalgia for his youth,
Okay.
and the seemingly endless possibilities that faded with time.
So even great poets aren't safe from those what-if moments. I think that's really reassuring, in a way. It's a universal human experience to look back and wonder about the paths not taken. For a while, I seriously considered going into medicine. There's a long line of doctors in my family, and a part of me felt drawn to that path. But ultimately, I followed my passion for storytelling.
And that's a great example of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile ourselves to the paths not taken,
Right.
to those closed doors?
It can be tough. There's always that lingering what-if feeling.
That's where incommensurable values come in.
Incommensurable values. That sounds intriguing and a little intimidating, to be honest. What does that even mean?
It simply means some things in life are difficult to compare or weigh against each other.
Huh.
Like, how do you compare the value of raising a family to the value of pursuing a fulfilling career?
Right.
Or, in your case, how do you measure the value of a career in medicine against a career in storytelling?
Right.
There's no single yardstick,
Right.
no right or wrong answer.
It's like comparing apples and oranges, right?
Exactly.
Each path has its own unique value, and choosing one inevitably means letting go of others.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that complexity instead of always searching for the correct path.
Exactly. And this can be especially tough in midlife when we've accumulated more experience, more
Mhm.
choices,
Yeah.
and potentially more regrets. But instead of viewing those closed doors as failures,
Yeah.
we can reframe them as evidence of a life rich with diverse and meaningful values.
That's a powerful shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on what we've missed out on,
Yeah.
we can see it as a testament to the richness of our journey.
Yeah.
So it's about embracing that complexity,
Yes.
that beautiful messiness of life,
Yeah.
rather than trying to simplify it down to a single best outcome.
Precisely. You know, Virginia Woolf grappled with this.
Okay.
She was a brilliant writer,
Right.
but often compared her life to her sister Vanessa Bell, who was a painter and a mother.
I can imagine how those comparisons could be both painful and thought-provoking. It makes you wonder if we all have a Vanessa in our minds, someone we measure our own choices against. But Woolf, she seemed to find solace and purpose in her writing, in the creation of her novels.
And that leads us to a potential antidote to that haunting what-if feeling that can crop up in midlife, forming strong attachments to people, to activities, to creative pursuits, can help us come to terms with loss and regret.
So it's about finding things that anchor us,
Yeah.
that give us a sense of belonging and purpose,
Yeah,
even as we acknowledge the paths not taken.
exactly. These attachments ground us,
Right.
providing a sense of meaning that can sustain us,
Right.
even as we face the inherent limitations of a single human life.
Wow.
But there's another potential trap we need to be aware of in this pursuit of meaning. This is where the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer comes in.
Well, this sounds juicy. What wisdom does Schopenhauer offer to help us navigate this stage of life?
Well, he differentiated between two types of activities, telic and atelic.
Telic and atelic. Give us the breakdown. What do those terms even mean?
Telic activities are those with a clear end goal,
Okay.
like finishing a project at work or saving up for a vacation.
Okay.
They're about striving towards a specific outcome. Atelic activities,
Right.
on the other hand,
Yeah.
are those enjoyed for the process itself?
So telic is about the destination.
Yeah.
And atelic is about enjoying the journey.
Exactly.
Okay.
Think about spending time in nature,
Right.
having a deep conversation,
Okay.
or getting lost in a creative pursuit.
Yeah.
These are often atelic activities.
Okay.
We engage in them for the inherent joy and satisfaction they bring,
Okay.
not for some external reward. Schopenhauer argued that placing too much emphasis on telic activities
Right.
can lead to a sense of emptiness, even when we achieve our goals.
It's like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's about savoring each step, rather than fixating on the destination.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about finding joy in the process, in the everyday moments,
Yeah.
not just in the achievement of some far-off goal.
It makes you wonder, though, is there a way to find a balance between the two?
Mm-hmm.
Between striving for those big goals that give us direction
Yeah.
and appreciating the beauty of the present moment.
That's a really insightful question.
Yeah.
And one that lies at the heart of what we're discussing today.
It really is the ultimate balancing act, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to keep one eye on the future, but still staying present right now.
And that's where this whole exploration of the midlife crisis can actually lead us to a more empowering perspective.
Okay.
It's not about denying the challenges or anxieties that can come up in this stage of life.
Right.
It's about recognizing that midlife is a time with incredible potential
Yeah.
for growth and transformation.
So it's not like a guarantee that we'll all have a breakdown
No, not at all.
and buy a sports car.
It's about how we choose to navigate this transition.
Right.
It's about making sense of our past choices,
Okay.
our present experiences,
Right.
and our hopes for the future.
It's about rewriting the narrative.
Right, absolutely.
Going from a fear of what if
Yeah,
to like a celebration of what is
Yeah.
and what could be.
exactly. And that involves a conscious effort
Okay.
to reconnect with those atelic activities we were talking about.
Okay.
It's about finding joy in the process.
Right.
You know, in the simple act of creating, connecting, and like really experiencing life.
Right. Right.
It could be anything, you know?
Yeah.
Spending time in nature, getting lost in a good book,
Right.
having a deep conversation,
Right.
pursuing a hobby.
Right.
The key is to find those activities that make you feel really alive and
Right.
present.
It's about asking ourselves, what brings me joy?
Yeah.
Not because it gets me somewhere else,
Right.
but just for the pure pleasure of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we engage in those activities, you know, those atelic moments,
Right.
we're not just passing the time, you know, we're really living.
Really living.
Exactly. And by incorporating more of these atelic moments into our lives,
Right.
we start to develop a deeper appreciation for the journey itself,
Right.
for all the richness and the complexity
Right.
that life has to offer.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive on the whole concept of the midlife crisis,
Yeah.
I think we've landed on a much more like hopeful
Yeah.
and empowering perspective. Like,
Yeah.
it's not this crisis to be afraid of,
Right.
but a transition to really embrace.
Precisely. It's a time for reflection,
Yeah.
for reevaluation, and ultimately for rediscovering what truly brings meaning and purpose to our lives.
And that brings us to our final thought-provoking question for you, dear listener.
Yeah.
How can you find that balance
Right.
between, striving for those big, meaningful goals
Yeah.
and also appreciating the journey itself, especially as you're navigating this chapter of your life?
What brings you joy?
Yeah.
What gives your life meaning?
Right.
And how can you kind of infuse more of that into your everyday experience?
And remember, there's
Yeah.
no single right answer.
Exactly.
It's about finding what works for you,
Yeah.
what brings you, that sense of fulfillment and aliveness in this moment.
So keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Yeah.
And keep living fully
Yeah.
embracing this beautiful complexity of
Yes.
this one precious life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time. Ready to explore another fascinating facet of the human experience.